Well, Vinod, it's really nice to see you, and I trust you're keeping well in the Netherlands.
I am. Thank you, Rodney.
Well, so Vinod, a lot of people are talking about BEPS and Pillar 1, and whether this is a march towards some sort of formulary apportionment of income. I'm very curious about your perspectives from an EU perspective on what's going on.
It's interesting that this OECD project is also trickling down to EU policymaking. And let me give you one example. In May of this year, the European Commission launched a communication, which is a non-binding strategy document of the European Commission. And there they mentioned that Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 EU implementation is of the utmost importance and will have the highest priority within the next 2 years. But then they make some statements that go beyond BEPS 2.0. They say we need to do more to fight aggressive tax planning and base erosion and profit shifting. And for example, they will come up with a new proposal for example, fighting the use of shell companies. So no or low substance entities. We will see a proposal by the end of this year. And on top of that, the EU Commission suggested to introduce, maybe after 2023-24, so-called EU BEFIT. And BEFIT is an acronym for Business in Europe Framework for Income Taxation. And if you read the statements carefully, because there are only a few paragraphs on what it means, the EU says, well, Pillar 1 formula approach to reallocate profits back to a market jurisdiction, and Pillar 2 global minimum taxations based on a consolidated accounting standard are the ideal stepping stones to move forward to a common tax base in the EU, including a formula apportionment of these profits back to the jurisdictions based on sales, on tangible assets, intangible assets, and labor, so salary and employees. But this is not something new. We've heard this before, right? And it was called the EU Common Corporate Tax Base. So it's something new, but at the same time, it's something old.
That's really interesting. So you almost have to learn from history to know what's coming down the track. And where do you think BEFIT is going?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the history. Let's go back on the EU Common Corporate Tax Base that was launched in 2011. It was launched under the premise that it would reduce administrative burden for companies, it would facilitate cross-border investment. So this was the red tape argument that would be, let's say, the unique selling point where the EU member states would have to adopt this thing because it's good for business and good for the EU internal market. But at the same time, there was something else underlying that directive, and that is that some of the larger member states in the EU, especially Germany, France, Italy, and Spain, felt that other EU jurisdictions like the Netherlands, Luxembourg, Ireland, Cyprus, Malta, Hungary, those smaller member states were competing on tax in a way that would attract tax base from the large member states. The smaller member states, by allowing very mobile types of income to their jurisdiction and allow for a low effective tax rate on that mobile income. So fighting aggressive tax planning was also underlying the CCTB proposal. So when it was launched in 2011, you saw that the EU member states could not find a common ground because the smaller member states felt they will lose tax competitiveness, they will lose tax base, and will lose tax sovereignty, and they were not willing to give that up. And that's why it failed in the negotiations 2013-14. The Commission tried to relaunch the thing in 2016. They revamped the proposal, but again, that failed. So looking forward, learning from history, at present, I do not have any indication that the EU member states are willing to go down this route again. They are willing to abide to Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 with a small formula apportionment on a part of the residual profits going back to the market jurisdiction, but they're not willing to go down the route to have a full reapportionment of total profits in the European context.
Very interesting. So the proposal's out there. Of course, we'll just have to wait and see, but if history is any indication, it may be that BEPS doesn't proceed along any sort of meaningful timeline. But I will say, Vinod, that point that you mentioned about a policy coming out on no substance holding companies is bound, if it comes out, bound to be very significant for many people who have set up holding companies historically for a variety of reasons, but they may not be peopled with sufficient substance. Did you say that that is intended to be issued sometime later this year?
Yeah, in the Commission working program, they are intending to launch a legislative proposal that would set a new standard of rules related to shell companies. And a shell company is a low or low taxed substance entity within the EU that achieves a certain tax benefit. So it could be reduced withholding tax because of application of a tax treaty, or could be that they're under a certain preferential regime for the income received at the level of the shell company. We, as KPMG, have submitted a contribution to the public consultation that was launched a few months ago. And we make the point clearly that we think there are already so many substance rules currently out there. The EU Court of Justice is fine-tuning the rules on substance. We have the core income generating activities from the OECD project. We have the principal purpose test in the multilateral instrument. We need to give those new rules time to be aligned and give time for coordinated efforts to make sure that there's a proper application of those rules before we top off a new legislative directive on shell companies. That's our main point.
So that's a fascinating point, and certainly something for us all to watch for towards the end of this year.
Yeah.
Well, Vinod, it's been a pleasure catching up with you again. It certainly sounds like we should continue to watch the space in the EU as things might be proceeding in parallel with, or somewhat consistently with, Pillar 1 and Pillar 2. So fascinating to catch up with you, and please stay healthy in these COVID challenging times.